Okay. Hope everybody can see and hear me now. All right. We're going now. All right. So we'll start off with positive words. These are from a classic book called The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. And part of that book says this, and now here is my secret, a very simple secret. It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye. All right. Go to the next slide. Okay, so a news story here from 2022. This deals with the Cherokee Nation, and it is a news story that looks at a 187-year-old promise, a treaty that was broken, one of the many treaties between the United States government and indigenous people. And so this article that appeared in the New York Times, the headline, Cherokees asked the United States to make good on a 187-year-old promise. For a start, and the subtitle here says, the demand that Congress honor a treaty and seat a non-voting delegate comes amid growing clashes over sovereignty and a tight race for Oklahoma's governor, a Cherokee citizen. And the image here is from a kindergarten class at the Cherokee Immersion School in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. And it says that a new law has led to concerns by some educators about what they can teach regarding Native American history. All right, so the issues and the controversies that are covered in this module and in the article by Ronald Takaki, for example, for today, they still mean a lot in 2023. All right, so this is one reference that shows that. We'll go to the next slide. So module 4, this is your first lecture, Native Peoples, Mexico and Manifest Destiny. So this module had to reschedule a little bit starting today, and we go to the 18th of April. Okay, go to the next slide. We've seen this image before, and it is covered in Ronald Takaki's reading assigned for today. So we had a chapter from Takaki's book, A Different Mirror, and an article on Manifest Destiny. This image, called American Progress, painted by John Gast in 1873, and Ronald Takaki gives some interpretations of the image on page 97. I've talked about it in class as well. So a lot of different ways to read it, but you can read it as a representation of manifest destiny. We could also read it as a representation of the virgin land, the so-called virgin land, the supposedly unspoiled wilderness that the white European settlers conquered. Okay? So yeah, pay special attention to Takaki's take on this image from page 97 of that chapter. We'll go to the next slide. So some main topics to get us started. And we'll start off with Manifest Destiny. So what we'll be doing in this unit is talking about Manifest Destiny as a set of ideas. This set of ideas has cultural, political, economic, racial, and religious implications and consequences. Then, now, in the future. Also, be emphasizing the importance of language, importance of words. So, westward expansion, that's one way of describing what happened along with manifest destiny. Can also refer to it as empire and conquest. Now, of course, the United States, the founders didn't want the United States to be an empire, but we'll see how it turned out that way. Especially, you read the article by Amy Greenberg that's assigned for this unit. That'll be coming up soon. That gives extensive description of how the development of an empire, which is not natural, began to be portrayed as something that was absolutely natural, organic, and therefore something that shouldn't be questioned. So we'll look at some native views on the theft of their land and white settlement. There'll be various primary sources by people back in the 1800s, and along with secondary sources like Greenberg and Takaki. So we'll read, among other things, some statements by Black Hawk, by John Ross. He's featured in Takaki's article, chapter, and Tecumseh. Okay. Go to the next slide. So I want to give you some background on Ronald Takaki, one of your authors for today. He was born in 1939, died in 2009. He was born in Honolulu, Hawaii, before that became a state. So he was from Japanese background. And of course, in Hawaii, there are quite a few people of Japanese ancestry there. Takaki was the descendant of people who worked the sugar plantations in Hawaii. So they came to Hawaii from Japan in the late 19th century. So the development of the sugar industry, Japanese immigrants played a key role in that. As time went on, Takaki, reflecting on his youth, talked about how he really liked to surf. When he was a young man, he liked to do that more than studying. Go figure, huh? But he began to change somewhat when he was in high school in Hawaii, and a Japanese American teacher encouraged him to apply to College of Wooster in Ohio. So leaving behind the lovely weather, paradise in Hawaii, go to the Midwest. Again, go figure. And while he was at the university, college in Ohio, met his future wife, Carol Rankin. They started a family eventually, and they had 3 children, 7 grandchildren. So quite the family man, Ronald Takaki. We'll go to the next slide. Okay, so here he is, and here's a good quote. Talk about his practice as an historian. So he said, the task for me is to not only comprehend the world, but to change the world. I would like to see a world where America lives up to its ideals and resolves the contradiction between reality and principles. So Takaki trained as an historian, but he's had a huge impact on American studies and the kind of focus on change and transformation, social justice. His work is widely assigned in American studies courses like this one. We'll go to the next slide. So a little bit more on Takaki's work. All right, so the book you're reading from, called A Different Mirror, A History of Multicultural America, published 30 years ago, won the American Book Award, a prestigious honor, and the book is still in print. So that speaks well of a history book. These aren't huge bestsellers, but this one's still in print, means people are still getting a lot out of it. Another major book that he wrote that I've used in several classes came out in 2000, called Double Victory, A Multicultural History of America in World War II. This was the first major study of the so-called Greatest Generation from the perspectives of racial and ethnic minorities. So the double victory there was the victory over fascism, victory over Germany and Japan and Italy in World War II, but also the victory at home, the victory over racism and segregation that was carried on along with World War II. And so that book, Double Victory, it focuses on voices and viewpoints of ordinary people, their stories previously often ignored, but Takaki wrote books and conducted workshops for kindergarten through grade 12 educators, definitely changed the way American history and American studies are taught. So this was the kind of history that focused on the so-called common people, primarily their voices, their agency. There is attention to the elites also, the presidents and various leaders like that. But I think you notice by reading this that the voices of, again, the common people, very emphasized in Takaki's writing. So please be aware of that. It separates his history from some of the predecessors. So what you see in Takaki, there's some similarity to the way Lerone Bennett wrote about enslavement. Okay? Go to the next slide. All right. So getting deeper into Takaki's chapter, and please refer to page 82 on this one. Now, Takaki gives a lot of attention to Andrew Jackson on the right-hand side there. Military hero, lawyer, successful businessman, became a very popular president from the Democratic Party and considered to be, in many ways, one of the first modern political campaigns where the media got involved in kind of building up Jackson as an American hero. Okay. So, and you have John Winthrop. We've heard about him before, told you about him. The shining city on the hill, the Puritan leader. Well, the way Andrew Jackson talked about the destiny of America and settling or conquering the West, a lot of his rhetoric drew from the Puritan tradition. Okay? So be aware of that. On page 22, some of these connections between how Jackson adapted some of the Puritan rhetoric for his cause and the nation's cause, or what he portrayed as the nation's cause. Okay, go to the next slide. All right, so referring to pages 83 to 87 in the Takaki chapter, he looks at the Choctaw Nation. And so ultimately, the Choctaw Nation, many of the people were relocated from Mississippi to Oklahoma. So Takaki gives you some good coverage of that. One thing that President Jefferson wanted to do, it's covered in the chapter here. If you look at page 83, the President Jefferson wanted to impose the white farming life on the Choctaws. As it says, the aim of Jefferson's policy was the transformation of the Choctaws into farmers. However, as the chapter states, the Choctaws of Mississippi, they had been an agricultural people long before the arrival of white people. And Takaki gives you some very vivid descriptions of such things as the green corn dance. Okay. Next point. So around 1830, Mississippi begins to take away the sovereignty, the self-determination of the Choctaw people. And this was not without resistance from the Choctaws. Okay. On page 84, toward the top there, you get some details there. The Mississippi state government, and you get a reference to an important event, the Treaty of Dancing Rabbit Creek, 1830. Okay. And later on that page 84. Okay. Toward the bottom, Treaty of Dancing Rabbit Creek. So it provided that the Choctaws, that they would have to give up all of their 10.4 million acres to the federal government, migrate to lands west of the Mississippi. Okay. So, sorry. All right. So, yeah, Takaki gives you some really good information on that, details, the nuances of that. So please be aware of that. Go to the next slide. I want to give some quotations from someone back in the day, George W. Harkins, member of the Choctaw Nation, addressing the whites of the United States, the American people. And here's what he had to say. And we'll be looking at this for the next couple of slides. So I'll just read from this. He says, it was considerable diffidence. Okay, so reservation, shyness, humility, considerable diffidence that I attempt to address the American people, knowing and feeling sensibly my incompetency and believing that your highly and well-improved minds would not be well entertained by the address of a Choctaw. So in his rhetoric there, Harkins, there's some irony there and some, I don't think he really believes that he as a Choctaw person is inferior in any way to his white audience, but he knows the white audience will see him that way. So he's trying to acknowledge that. So there's an undercurrent of justified resentment here. Okay. We'll go to the next slide. He says, but having determined to emigrate west of the Mississippi River this fall, I have thought proper in bidding you farewell to make a few remarks expressive of my views and the feelings that actuate me on the subject of our removal. We as Choctaws rather chose to suffer and be free than live under the degrading influence of laws, which our voice could not be heard in their formation. All right, so this is, I'm assuming that George Harkins, again, who is educated in white ways, get his rhetoric here, that his point of view, he didn't speak just for himself in this statement. All right, we'll go to the next slide. All right, so referring primarily to pages 87 to 91, onto the Cherokees. Okay, so around the same period, 1829, shifting the scene to Georgia, the Georgia government controlled land of the Cherokee people, as Takaki explains. And by 1835, there was a treaty between the US government and the Cherokees, but this treaty was bogus. It didn't speak for all the Cherokees. But unfortunately, tragically, by 1838, it had resulted in internment, captivity for the Cherokees, and then a forced march to the west. And the next point, this became known as the Trail of Tears. In fact, there was more than one Trail of Tears. This is probably the best known one. Almost 25% of the Cherokee population at the time perished on the Trail of Tears. All right, next slide. In various forced migrations here. So you have this map, 1800s. So up in the northern part there, in the middle, Wisconsin Territory, the Sauk and Fox nations. Wisconsin Territory, Iowa Territory relocated west of the Missouri River into present-day Kansas. You can see there. Moving lower, moving south. You see the migrations from Georgia and Alabama, Cherokees and the Creeks, moving west through Tennessee and Missouri. And then the Chickasaw and the Choctaw from Mississippi, moving west, and also the Seminoles in Florida, 1832, moving west, and lots of relocation into present-day Oklahoma. Okay? So quite a bit of forced migration in the first part of, first half of the 1800s. All right, go to the next slide. Okay, pages 96 to 97. These parts of the chapter, the headings American Progress, Civilization over Savagery. Okay. So that was the common rhetoric among the white population that, this was necessary for savagery to be pushed aside and civilization and refinement to be brought in. So Takaki looks at situations in central Nebraska, northern Kansas, the lives of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Kiowa, Sioux, and Pawnee nations. There's a good bit of material on the importance of the buffalo hunt to the Pawnee, the sacred significance, so much a part of their lives and culture. Pawnee also engaged in farming and fur trading. This is covered in the chapter. Let's take a look at page 16. Page 94. Okay. So by the time, this is jumping ahead quite a bit. Okay, we were in the first half of the 1800s. Now we're in the second half after the Civil War, and Takaki takes you into the Grant administration. But the Transcontinental Railroad, obviously a tumultuous and transformative event that signaled probably more than anything, that the West had been conquered. And it quotes from Ulysses S. Grant saying that this gives a sense of what this meant for the native population. He says here, the building of railroads and the access thereby given to all the agricultural and mineral regions of the country is rapidly bringing civilized settlements into contact with all tribes of Indians. And he said that the indigenous people, they do not harmonize well, and one or the other has to give way in the end. So, of course, it was the fate of the indigenous people, according to Grant and others. It was inevitable that they would have to surrender to the progress represented by the railroad and other movements. Okay? So by 1869, much of this was finished. Okay? Yeah. Can't overestimate the importance of the railroad. And of course, railroad built with labor, poor people, people of color, Asian laborers, Mexican, Black laborers, along with white laborers. Okay. Go to the next slide. Oh, sorry. One last point. Indian Appropriation Act of 1871. On page 95, about in the middle, railroad companies really pushed for this. And that act declared that hereafter, 1871, no Indian nation or tribe within the territory of the United States shall be recognized or acknowledged as an independent nation, tribe, or power with whom the United States may contract by treaty. So, enormous clout from the railroad companies in backing that act. Go to the next slide. Okay. That brings this first lecture, Module 4, to an end. So I got done a little ahead of time. I will stop sharing and start and see if you have any questions or comments out there. Got plenty of time. It's just a little bit after 9 o'clock. While I'm waiting, I'll just go ahead to, the next major assignment is due on Monday. So I hope that's going nicely for you. Some of you might be done. All right, I see some questions here. Let me open this up. The Trail of Tears. What is the Trail of Tears? As well as the Transcontinental Railroad. Rather than answering that for you, I want to steer you toward the Takaki article. That's a great question from Javier, but it is covered in today's reading by Ronald Takaki. So I want you to return to that. And actually in the lecture today, I gave you some page numbers that help you find that. So yeah, once the recording is up, please return to that, and it should help you with that. Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments for today, Tuesday? All right. Well, if you do have any more, if you can't think of any now, please email them to me. And also I am available for office hours. Okay. So please let me know if you would like to do those virtually. Again, sorry I can't be there with you. I hope that all your classes are going well, including this one. Thank you for your patience and flexibility with these Zoom lectures, okay? So this one will be up on our Canvas site very soon, okay? All right. So I'm going to go ahead and end and wish you a great Tuesday, and see and hear you again on, let's see here. Okay, I've got one here that says you said Monday. Sorry for that mistake. Yeah, this is Tuesday, April 4th. And yeah, the module 3 task is due on Wednesday. That's the confusion. Sorry to confuse you there. All right, yeah, but we're into module 4 now. Okay. All right. Okay, so go ahead and wish you a great Tuesday, and see and hear you on Thursday. Take care, everybody.